Good afternoon, group. I'm going to present an age reversal update, January 23rd, 2021. And as I do with any presentation, I make the PowerPoint slides available on a website so that you can view them afterwards in case you want to do some research on your own, read the actual published studies that validate what I'm saying. So you can pay attention to the material I'm going to present here over the next 25 minutes and then look at the slides later on the age-reversal.net website. Now, the first study I'm going to talk about was published January 6, 2021, and it didn't get any media coverage because, well, the capital of the United States was occupied and the media was focused on Washington, D.C. But what this study showed is that just editing one gene in a normal aged mouse resulted in 25% lifespan extension. And if this CRISPR treatment would work in a similar way in aged humans, we don't know that yet, but we have reason to believe it might, that would mean average humans living to be about 98 years of life. And that was only a single DNA gene edit. They identified 100 potential genes that they could have edited. They just picked one. And that one gene edit resulted in 25% longer life. What will happen when they start editing the other ones could be maybe a major breakthrough in defeating aging. And the second study, also published, by the way, January 6, 2021, looked at progeria mice, and they also had just very minimal editing done. They had 2 DNA base pairs edited, and the normal age longevity for a progeroid mice, about 7 months. Well, if they were CRISPR treated, if they had those 2 genes edited, they lived 17 months, and those 17 months were a lot healthier. Now, if we could get a combination CRISPR treatment in humans, I know this is an optimistic extrapolation, but we want to make it clear, just to put it in context, that something similar as far as a lifespan extension could mean humans living to be 160 years of age. That's assuming CRISPR Cas9 gene editing technology works in people the way it does in mice. And good news is the genome of the mice is not very different from humans. So if you're editing genes in mice and they're living longer, humans might get a similar benefit. Well, as the year 2020 ended, Fortune, in their annual investor's guide. Now, this is read by the titans of industry, finance, biotech. They want to see, what does Fortune think is the next best advance to put money into to make money? And this was an editorial that talked about America's pending healthcare cost crisis. We can't afford to pay for the healthcare of elderly people because they just cost too much money. So the author of this editorial in Fortune said, well, the solution here, the most exciting opportunity to solve this problem is to understand and address the biology of aging. Very interesting. December 2020, we have Fortune putting up in their magazine, being read by conventional people, that aging is the problem that needs to be corrected. And they base so much of that on what we've been talking about for the last 5 to 6 years. Therapeutic plasma exchange, thymic regeneration, which was done at Greg Fahey's lab, where he reversed aging 2.5 years, and then reversing extracellular protein stiffening. That's the process of glycation that we work so hard to prevent. So this was all talked about in this Fortune magazine editorial, December 30th, 2020, in a very favorable way. And for those who remember some of my previous presentations, we talked about this incredible reversal of aging using human growth hormone, DHEA, and metformin. The subjects also were given vitamin D and zinc, but the 3 main interventions, growth hormone, DHEA, metformin, they resulted in a 2.5-year reversal of biological age as measured by the epigenetic clock that uses DNA methylation patterns to identify if a person is aging rapidly, aging slowly, reversing aging. And this therapy that Dr. Fahey and collaborators at Stanford and UCLA, what they were able to show was a 2.5-year reversal of biological age. And as an update to Greg's work, he is now recruiting 100 healthy people aged 50 to 80 so he can see if he can enable the same type of epigenetic age reversal 2.5 years or better as he did in the original TRIM trial. The TRIM stands for thymus regeneration, immune, insulin modulation, TRIM trial. It's a fantastic study, and it validated for the first time that aging can go in reverse in human beings, and that occurred over a 12-month period. It didn't take a long time for it to happen. So the mainstream is recognizing the need to reverse aging in people. And by doing that, they will be able to avoid the healthcare cost tsunami that's inevitably going to engulf cities, states, and the federal government if we don't do something to make older people grow biologically younger. We're getting mainstream recognition, and that often leads to mainstream investment, which leads to, well, immortality, if we're lucky. So, Fortune's conclusion, why not launch an Operation Warp Speed for biological aging the way they've done for COVID and other types of situations like, well, Manhattan Beach Project. When World War II broke out, we needed an atomic bomb. We didn't want to have to go and invade Japan. So in November 2009, we put together the Manhattan Beach Summit. And we used the word Manhattan as an analogy to the Manhattan Project that developed an atomic bomb within a short period of time. We sought to validate methods to reverse aging in people in a very short period of time because we were all aging to death. Our group felt that sense of urgency, as was done, but the Fortune conclusion is let's go at Operation Warp Speed and see what we can do about biological aging. Now, you go back to 2009, we had no idea how we could reverse aging in people. We just didn't know. Move forward 12 years, we've got dozens of potential therapies, and every one of the therapies you see on that right-hand screen is being used one way or another by people in experimental settings. Some people are traveling around the world to get these therapies done at clinics, and some of them you don't need to travel anywhere. They're available right here. So we go from 2009 to 2021, we've made exponential gains in our knowledge base. So Dr. George Church, Harvard University, believes he will have a cure for aging using CRISPR-Cas9 technology by the year 2030. Problem is, most of us are going to be challenged to ensure ourselves being alive by that year. I'm going to tell you a way to improve your odds later on, but I'm going to talk now about the CRISPR technology and the brand new studies that came out. January 6, 2021, this study published in Nature. They looked at progeria mice, and they did the gene editing. Wall Street Journal reported the next day that when they edited just 2 genes in the progeroid mice, they were able to more than double the lifespan compared to the untreated mice. This is a major, major advance, and they described it more, and this is just quotes out of the Wall Street Journal, that this could enable people eventually who have progeria to live a lot longer. And the mice, well, they were not just older living, they were healthier as they went through the aging process. And for those who don't know a lot about progeria, it's a rare disorder in children. They age just like older people do, but they do it real fast. So by the time they're 12 or 13 years of age, they are old people. Many of them die by age 11, 12, or 13. Some make it to 20 years, but for the most part, it's accelerated aging, and at the moment, no cure, but there may be right now based on this research. And one of the gene factors, one of the genetic factors that's inherent with progeria is a highly toxic protein called progerin. It's produced, and this is the primary age accelerant that causes these children to turn into old people within 13 to 20 years as far as their maximum lifespan. And what they did is they edited just 2 DNA base pairs, and they studied these mice, and the ones who didn't get the editing, well, they died when they were supposed to, around 7 months of age. But the CRISPR-edited healthy mice on the right, they lived for 17 months. They also lived for many healthy months. By 11 months of age, they were still healthy, running around a cage. They didn't show apparent signs of accelerated aging, whereas most of the unedited mice were dead to the left. So this is a major advance that reflects what we may be able to do with normal aged people. And to give you an idea of how simplistic this kind of technology is, and I know it may sound complicated, biological genetic editing, but what they did is look at the progeria gene mutations, that's T and A. These are the progeroid DNA base pairs, T and A, and they also realized, well, if they just substitute them with healthy C and G, healthy normal DNA base pairs, where they're not going to produce that progerin protein, and they might be able to get some real benefits. And to see how simple this was done, they took a base editor, a base DNA editor, inserted it into a virus, and then infected the animals with a non-toxic virus, or relatively non-toxic. This is just an experiment. And the base editor in the virus, it rearranged the gene expression patterns so that the progeroid A and T, which are the toxic mutated genes, they transformed into G and C, which are normal genes. And the result was, wow, 510 days of life compared to 215, and that was only 2 edits to the genes. Just imagine when we start doing combined gene therapy with people where we may edit several hundred genes, we may become, at that point, invulnerable to normal aging. And the Wall Street Journal talked about this. If this model applies to humans, progeroid children might live into their 40s or later. If anybody thinks biological gene editing is too complex to translate into clinical reality, think about that smartphone in your pocket. What had to be done to enable that technology to work? The integrated circuit microchip, that in of itself an absolute miracle of science, but then miles of programmed code that had to be written in there so that your smartphone is reliable and does all those amazing things. Well, with the CRISPR gene editing, we're initially now talking only about swapping out a few unhealthy genes with normal ones. It's rather simple, and it's not nearly as complex as what you're looking at the screen. So for those who are questioning whether or not gene editing is the future of medicine, think about how IT technology, communications technology has advanced over the last 5 decades. We're seeing that right now in the biomedical science. So an optimistic extrapolation of this CRISPR mouse study, the unedited progeria mice, they live about 7 months. The CRISPR-treated progeria mice, they live 17 months. Now, an untreated, typical, normal human lifespan is only 78 years. Now, that does not apply to most of the readers and listeners of our programs because they're taking care of themselves. So they have a much longer average lifespan, but it's still ridiculously short. Now, if we can identify a combination of CRISPR treatments to use in aging humans, and we are able to yield the same lifespan extension as was done in the progeroid mice, well, we'd be looking at human lifespans of over 160 years. Now, that has not happened yet. We don't know when it will happen, but the fact that they're doing it in the mouse model and mice, their genomes are very similar to ours, we're looking at an 8 or 9 window when we may be able to avail ourselves to these types of technologies. So this is a slide I drafted just to try to make it very clear what this optimistic extrapolation is. The unedited, untreated progeroid mouse there, 7.1 months. CRISPR-treated edited mouse, well, it's got 17 months of healthier life. And if you combined all these together, a CRISPR-treated human might live over 160 years. We don't know yet. But the fact that we have the capability of potentially doing it makes it incredibly thrilling. And, well, as it relates to combination gene therapy, that's already been done. Published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in November 2019, Dr. George Church of Harvard was able to show, in response to just a single dose of a combination gene therapy, 58% improved function after heart failure, a 38% reduction in a vascular disease marker, 75% reduction in kidney atrophy. You realize most people over age 65 are suffering from a degree of renal impairment, and here he was able to reduce the atrophy by 75%. And number 4 here is complete reversal of obesity and type 2 diabetes. That might mean you could eat what you want and not have to worry about the weight gain or the diabetic complications. So that's what's being done in a laboratory right now. They're developing combination gene therapies much more sophisticated than the simple ones we've talked about so far that have markedly extended lifespan in normal age mice and progeroid mice. So the second study, which again is more impressive than the progeroid study because this was normal age mice. And all they did is take one gene called CAT7, which they've identified as being a significant driver of cellular senescence. But they identified 100 other genes that were also drivers, but they chose just to target this one gene using CRISPR to silence it or turn it off, however way you want to use it. They disabled this gene so it wouldn't induce the cellular senescence, and that extended lifespan in normal age mice 25%. And it also improved their overall appearance and their grip strength. Now, mice and humans, we share virtually the same set of genes, so there's a good chance that what's working in the mouse model to extend lifespan might induce some benefits in people also. So you see this 25% extended lifespan, that's only in response to one gene edit. What if they edit all 100 of those senescent accelerating genes and other ones, we may have solved the aging process. So to extrapolate again from this normal age CRISPR study, 25% lifespan extension in humans would equate to, assuming the CRISPR treatment works in a similar way in normal age people, to about a 98-year average lifespan. Well, that would get us to an era when we'll have all kind of technologies available to us. Now, the bowhead whale is very fortunate. Its genome lets it survive in the wild for as long as 268 years. That motivated our Life Extension Group and the Methuselah Foundation to fund some research. We sequenced the DNA of the bowhead whale, and it's being used, it's going to be used soon to study it in human DNA. And what they're hoping to do is edit human DNA to replicate the DNA of a bowhead whale so that we might also have a maximum lifespan of about 268 years. The fact that a mammal living in the wild can live that long is amazing. It shows you what the potential for longevity research is. Now, we're talking about unedited organisms and edited organisms. In other words, the mice that got the CRISPR treatments, they would be edited, or at least partially edited. And if someone were to ask you, do you want your genes edited? You might have to stop and think, I'm not really sure how to answer that question. Well, to the left is an unedited draft manuscript, and that represents a typical aging, unedited person. We're an absolute mess from a genetic standpoint. As we grow older, our genes go haywire. The bad ones overexpress themselves, they create degenerative illness, and the good genes, well, they're repressed. So if you were to have your genes fully edited, it would transform you from what you see on the left-hand side to a final article. I just chose one of my upcoming As We See It articles to give it as an example. This is an edited version. It's carefully reviewed and studied and typeset, and it looks really nice and it reads really well. So if you're ever asked, do you want to have your genes edited, you absolutely do want to have them edited when it can safely be done, because it's the difference between the left and right hand side of this particular page. George Church continues to advance the science. He's received worldwide acclaim. He was featured on 60 Minutes in December 2019, and they were talking about him finding a cure for all viral diseases, genetic diseases, and aging. He was talking about it. The CBS News correspondents were thrilled about the fact that there's actually hope out there, that aging is not the dreadful inevitability that most people still think it is. George Church is making incredible progress. I look forward to making some announcements about that really soon. So by the year 2030, we may have a genetic cure for aging. But the problem is, a lot of us won't be around by year 2030, which is why I'm going to present some data now on how a lot of us can live about 25% longer using existing technology. And it's not very high tech at all. We're talking about adhering very strictly to the Mediterranean diet. This has been shown long ago to induce good health, reduce degenerative disease risk, but 2018, British Journal of Nutrition came out with a study showing an overall 25% lower risk of dying to those who adhere to the Mediterranean diet as opposed to those who don't. So this is a way to enjoy the benefits of healthy eating and longer lifespans so you make it to year 2030. Ultra-processed foods have a wide range of definitions. They apply to so much of what we take for granted that might be okay for us to eat, and they're really not. This list covers a wide spectrum of what most people eat on a daily, weekly basis, and you add it all up together, and all of a sudden you're engaged in a diet that is heavy in ultra-processed foods and high-temperature cooked foods. Anything cooked above 250 degrees, it creates damage to the proteins in the foods that then damage your own body's proteins. So avoid foods cooked at high temperature, which includes grilling and barbecuing and frying, and the way most foods are cooked, unfortunately, make them more carcinogenic than they would be if they were cooked via poaching, boiling, stewing, steaming. Avoid foods cooked at high temperature. Now, 2 large European studies came out, and they found the associations were very strong between people who eat these highly processed foods and the risk of heart attack. This is a problem that's increasing, by the way. More people are having heart attacks compared to what they were the last couple of decades. The reason is people are eating horrific diets, and these results from these studies show that even just a 10% increase in the proportion of ultra-processed foods you eat, well, it then increases your cardiovascular risk 12, 13, 11%. You will increase your risk of having a heart attack or stroke just with a 10% increase in eating these ultra-processed foods. So avoiding them as much as you can, really important, because what the researchers found is that people who only ate a minimal amount of processed foods, they reported a lower risk of all kinds of degenerative illnesses. So here we are funding all kind of research, trying to figure out a way to slow and reverse aging, and people are eating themselves to death in many ways that are circumventing what we're trying to do to stop this deadly process. And there were 2 European studies. The second study of 20,000 Spanish adults, they found that the people who ate the most processed foods, ultra-processed foods, were 62% more likely to die over 2 decades. Wow, that's what we don't want. We don't want that 62% increase in our risk of death, so we should avoid that toxic food mix. Now, this study came out January 7th, 2021. It looked at men with high-grade progressing prostate cancer. This is people who, unfortunately, may very well die of their disease in a very slow and painful way. Well, each 1 unit improvement in adherence to the Mediterranean diet was associated with a 12% lower trend of aggressive prostate cancer detrimental progression. And if you could improve your adherence to the Mediterranean diet by 4 units, the score would equal about a 48% associated lower trend of this deadly prostate cancer progressing in your body. So if Mediterranean diets can slow the progression of an active cancer, think of how well they may be in preventing that malignancy and reducing the risk of so many other degenerative illness. Now, our longitudinal study that we initiated back in 2019, live at RADFest 2019 in Las Vegas, well, we've shifted to an online digital mode. This makes it really easy. You can do your consenting electronically online. You can enroll it with your health information, fill out the questionnaires, and then at your convenience have an age management blood test panel with the omega-3 index. That's all included for $495. Retail cost of these blood tests, over $3,000. You get them at a research price, which is heavily subsidized, $495. You do that every year, and that serves as your comprehensive blood test panel that you're able to see changes in response to the various anti-aging, age reversal interventions that you choose to engage in. If we don't collect that data, we don't know what's really working out there. So it's critical that people enroll who are interested in being part of a group that's seeking to reverse aging, so we can see how everyone is doing, identify what's working, what's not working. So the website is at the bottom of this page, vitalityandaging.org. You can enroll for the longitudinal study in which we will keep track of a large group of people, hopefully thousands over a 10-year period, to identify what therapies are working, what are failing, or what combinations of therapies are working. This is a study that everyone viewing this should consider participating in. And just one of the studies that we're going to be looking at is therapeutic plasma exchange. It continues to be validated in the scientific literature in both people and mice, mainly mice right now. They're getting the benefits as usual. They're getting the benefits first. And what happens with plasma dilution is you undergo in a doctor's office a procedure known as apheresis. It removes your senile proteins and then puts in fresh albumin. The fresh albumin has a regenerative effect systemically, most noticeably in the brain. People with early stage cognitive impairment, this might be something good to do. But if you're going to do that, I really hope you'll enroll in the longitudinal study first, so we get a baseline age management blood test panel, and then see where you are after a series of therapeutic plasma exchange procedures. We want to see if we have 20 or 30 people who do this, is it really working? And the only way we can know that is to get baseline blood tests done and then follow up after you're done with the therapy. See, have we put aging in reverse? Have we improved clinical measures of degenerative illness? We want to see that kind of information. And unfortunately, too many people are sitting on the sidelines. When a billionaire dies, I create a PowerPoint slide because these people had the money to accelerate anti-aging medicine, cancer research. They could have done a lot, and these individuals are often very generous with their money, except they don't put money in the right places. And as a result, someone like this, an incredible success in the business world, $35 billion. He's no longer around. If I had that kind of money, I believe I would still be alive. I'd figure out a way around non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. About 70% of people nowadays are cured of this, by the way, but the older you get, the more your immune system is senescent. Well, you don't survive the way you would when you were younger. So that's a real problem, aging and cancer. Makes the cancer much more difficult to treat. So our Human Age Reversal Project, this is the Vitality and Aging Interventions Trial. We're up over $1 million raised. The money is all in the bank. It is waiting to fund a trial of 50 people, and I'll tell you more about that in the next age reversal update that we do. Donations can be made to this address in Boca Raton, or you can do it online. The more money that we have in our research account, the more research we can fund. It's really that simple. We've got enough right now to study 50 people over a 19-month period. We'd like to study more people and introduce more experimental interventions, see how young we can make them. And for those who take dietary supplements, please consider the ones that I offer. And I say that in the context is I'm funding age reversal research from the proceeds of the dietary supplements. I'm using the supplement sales to fund the overhead cost of these multiple clinical trials that we're engaged in. And I can do that because people are buying the supplements, and I can transmit money right into different charities. They're doing incredible work. So I want to thank everyone for their, well, it's now about 44 years of support for life extension. We've been around since 1977. And for those who want to view this entire presentation online, I'm going to give you that PowerPoint slide at the end. But just to recap what we talked about here, the study published in January 2021, just a couple weeks ago, showing 25% lifespan extension in response to just editing one gene in a normal aged mouse, and that might be able to be done in humans if we develop multiple gene therapies, which are being worked on right now, combination gene treatments. And then the progeroid data published in January 6, 2021, the same day as the normal aged mouse. Well, that mouse that got the CRISPR therapy lived 17 months compared to about 7 for the untreated mouse. And if we extrapolate this, and this is an optimistic assumption, I know, but if we extrapolate, assuming that normal aged people are going to have access to combination CRISPR therapies, we may very well be looking at 160-year human lifespans with the technologies that are available maybe within the next 5 to 6 years. It's absolutely incredible. And I go back to 2009. We had this conference out in Southern California. About 65 people attended, and we sat around thinking, what can we do to reverse aging? None of us had any idea whatsoever. Zero. No really way forward. And then we moved to 2021, and in the first month, 2 studies come out on the same day showing that the CRISPR treatment extended lifespan 25% in a normal aged mouse, and then progeroid mice, much more lifespan extension. And if all this can be put into humans, we could see people living a lot longer and a lot healthier. So this entire presentation is available at age-reversal.net. You can click on the slides, click on the studies, review the studies, learn as much as you can about this technology that may very well save our life. Thank you so much for tuning in.